How's it going, guys? Sean here. I'm going to do a tabletop review for you guys on the Fallkniven A1 Army Survival knife. Didn't get a chance to show you guys the box. This is a box that came in. It's got this sweet holographic sticker. Lets you know it's the real deal. Also reading online, apparently, you know you got the real deal when there's brown inside the box. Killer. Very unassuming box, but it's just a box. Bought it from Blade HQ actually for $200. I figured Blade HQ would give me the real deal. I didn't really want to mess around with something cheaper on Amazon that could have not been the real deal. But let's go ahead and check out the knife here. Really just a killer blade. You can see that mirror polish I was able to produce with some simple polishing compound straps and newspaper. Quite exquisite. So what is this knife? It's actually a Swedish survival knife made by Fallkniven, which is in Sweden. It's made possibly by a company named Hattori, I believe, in Japan. That's just a lot of hearsay I've been reading on the forums. They also produce a Cold Steel SRK, so they're practically the same knife. They're made by the same companies. One is imported to Cold Steel, and the other one is made to Fallkniven specifications and sent to them. So I feel like a lot of the cost of this knife is because, one, it's made in Japan for a Swedish company. It is then imported from Japan to Sweden, which is then exported to America. Import, export, I really don't know if I'm using those words correctly. It's fine. We're talking about a knife here. So I bought this knife because I was looking for something to fill into a role. I've been watching a lot of bushcrafting videos, and this right here was sufficient for me for a long time. This is just my Mora companion. It's really a sweet blade. It doesn't have to be the most durable knife in the world for me, because usually when I'm going out and camping, bushcrafting, whatever you want to call it, I'm bringing something like this. This is my Fiskars Axe X15, and this is what all my heavy-duty chores handle. You can see rust on both of these blades. They're both carbon steel blades. Where I live, temperate rainforest, very wet, soaked, and I'm doing a lot of other things. I don't really like to put the extra effort into oiling my blades, which really steers me towards stainless knives, but the problem is they're never going to cut as good as carbon, especially at the price point for both of these tools. Both those tools I just showed you cost in the realm of 15–30 bucks. So you're going to get the most for your money if you're going to go carbon. So watching those videos, I was wanting something that was more durable. Watching Dave Canterbury's videos on what he thinks a survival knife should be. Also, what's his name? The guy up north, Morris Kohansky, he also says a survival knife should basically be a pry bar that works wood very, very well. And I got to thinking the reason why I wanted a survival knife in the first place is I usually don't carry the axe on me. I usually carry the Mora on me. But if my kit were somehow to be separated from me, I would want something on me that I feel could be confident that wasn't going to break from batoning and could really do a lot of heavy tasks without breaking, which led me to buying what I thought would have been a good survival knife for the money, since I'm really on a good budget. And I got this charade knife right here, which was stainless. I really wanted the carbon version, but the steel really let me down. I was because I can sharpen my own knives, it really is a game changer for what knives I do buy and which ones I like. I really don't care how sharp they are out of the box. What I really care about is how sharp they can get. So I put a huge emphasis on quality steel. I feel like you should really put the extra money in for the steel over the aesthetics, which is basically what I've learned from this charade knife, which didn't cost a lot of money. It's got decent ergos for chopping, things like that of that nature, but it was difficult to get a hair shaving edge on this bad boy. And the moment I would cut something, wood, what have you, the edge would deform no matter what I did. So I became very disenchanted with the whole notion of a survival knife because they're so thick. The geometry is not very good for cutting, and then when you mix that with a poor quality steel, it's a weird concept because you're basically buying a knife that can't cut. So upon further inspection, I looked into this knife right here with a high quality steel, and to me it looked like it could have been the knife of my dreams. A knife that's thick enough to handle a lot of abuse and yet still able to cut like my Mora. And God, I'm really impressed because I found the knife I was looking for. This knife can cut, and it can also take the abuse. So for me, this is basically my dream knife. So I feel like it really did meet my expectations. Let's talk more about the steel. It's a VG10. It's laminated between two layers of 420 J softer stainless. You can kind of, I'm not sure if that'll pick up. It's very faint. There's that darker line here, and that's where that VG10 core is, and the two softer steels. Sorry, that's not focusing in very well. And so it's pretty hard to tell, but that line right there is also the line of lamination where the VG10 core is. So I feel like this knife, VG10, can be very, let's just say brittle, but I feel like when you get it this thick and combine it with this type of grind, this convex, not only do you get the performance of how it cuts through wood, but it takes the best attributes of VG10 and maximizes it to reduce the drawbacks of it, which makes this knife so fantastic, in my opinion. And you have to remember, I'm a little biased because I can sharpen my own knives, so I can appreciate the finer qualities of certain steels versus others. So you do get the durability, you get really good retention. VG10 is not known for having a high amount of edge retention compared to other stainless steels, high-speed ones like S30V. But because of this thickness and the convex grind, it really does perform better than a lot of other VG10 knives. I'm really impressed. I thought the convex grind was really just a bunch of hype, but I feel like it is something somewhat of a big deal, almost the next evolution over a Scandinavian grind knife. And I love my Scandi knives. Before I bought this one, I bought another laminated steel knife. This one right here. This is a Mora A1 tool steel with a, I'm not sure, I think it's just a softer 1095 on each side with an A1 core. But the problem is, this camera probably can't pick it up very well. You could see that edge, how it's a little bit deformed there. I haven't cut anything with this blade except for wood. And I feel like that's a lot of the problem with these Scandinavian grind knives, is that's the drawback for having something so sharp, is that it is much, much weaker than something that has that secondary bevel on it. But yeah, this knife is crazy sharp, but it doesn't hold that crazy, crazy sharpness for very, very long because of how much steel is supporting that very, very fine edge. And so it will deform, it will get microchips. And again, that is just from cutting wood. I am not chopping with this thing. That's just from carving feather sticks right there, guys. So needless to say, I felt like I was a little disappointed. I mean, I love this knife. It's very beautiful, but Mora has increased the price on a lot of their knives. I bought this thing for 50 bucks. Alright, so moving forward more with this knife, talking about the retention, performance, resharpening ability. Like I said, I was able to put this just beautiful mirror polish on this blade using just some green chromium oxide paste, polishing compound you could find in any hardware store for probably about $4 or $5. Leather belt. When I'm out in the field, usually I take with me this guy, my work sharp. I usually never use these diamond sharpeners, but mostly just this strop. And it's really just loading the strop, coloring it on like a crayon with fresh compound, and using that to strop the edge. And I've just got done actually sharpening it. My final step actually is the, let's see here. You guys are probably gonna laugh. It's actually just this right here, newspaper. This is my final step, the finest sharpening step I have. I don't have any of those $200 Chosera stones, 10,000 grit or anything like that. So for me, this is my final step to really bring out that mirror polish and refine my edge. And just to show you guys, this is a little hard to do, but for how thick this knife is, I mean, this is phone book paper right here. I feel like that's probably one of the better tests for how sharp an edge is, as well as if it could dry shave arm hair. And I'm currently out of arm hair, so I won't be showing you guys anything like that. But yes, it's very, very easy to sharpen. People out there that say VG10 or this knife, oh, don't buy that, it's going to be really hard to sharpen. Negative. This knife is incredibly easy to sharpen. Probably one of my easier steels to sharpen. I would say the one thing that makes this knife more difficult to sharpen than others is the convex grind. It's not the steel, it's the grind of the knife that makes it more complicated. And actually, a lot of things that people get confused about this knife is that they believe it's a zero grind all the way down to the edge. And guys, that's not the case. If you could see, there is a micro bevel. I don't think it's showing up very well on this side, but there's a micro bevel on this knife from the factory. Maybe it's more apparent on this side. And so it's not ground zero. There is a very tiny, steep bevel put on this edge at the very, very final leading edge of this knife. And how that works is, and it's very common on a lot of Japanese knives, a lot of Japanese kitchen knives have these micro bevels, is the grind itself is at this angle. But when they put the micro bevel on, and they do this as a final step with the very highest grit stone that they have, they steepen it to about here. And they only do a few passes using the finest grit stone that they have. And that's what produces that micro bevel. So when you're resharpening this knife, what's tricky about it, or even if you're just stropping it, is yes, you do want to strop it at that angle you could see, but then also when you're done stropping at that angle, to actually get the very leading edge of this knife, unless you do some regrinding to make it a zero grind, you need to bring it up to about here, about this steep, and that's how you strop the very leading edge of this knife, since it does come stock with a micro bevel, unless you do some grinding to remove it. And to be honest with you guys, I think I'll just keep it, since I do a lot of heavy use tasks with this knife, such as chopping, things of that nature. I feel like it really does improve The durability of the edge, I really like the way it's been performing lately. It could be sharper, it could be more razor sharp, but I feel like I'm really abusing this knife a lot, and so to keep it from chipping out, I think I will just keep that micro bevel on there since it is performing to my expectations. I feel like it's performing very good. So I got a piece of wood here. Move this stuff out of the way just to show you guys how well this bad boy can do a few tasks. So I'll place my stopper cut here. People say this knife is really too big for a lot of bushcraft tasks, but I beg to differ. I think this knife does really well since it is so sharp. I'm just gonna make just a basic notch here for you guys. And you can see just how well this thing will cut. Really just bites into the wood. This is a piece of green cottonwood right here. And that's a decent notch with this bad boy. Also, what's more surprising is how well this convex grind can feather. You can really make some fine feathers. Now, the more curls you can get, according to Morris Kahansky, the finer the feathers are, which means the more likely they are to ignite with a ferrocerium rod. And you could see how little effort this takes. A lot of people aren't used to knives this big that can actually cut. And that's what makes this Fallkniven in a class of its own. It's the fact that how much abuse this knife can handle, and yet it is still a knife. And when I say it's still a knife's primary purpose is to cut. And you guys could see there just how fine these curls are, how little effort that took. And the beauty about a convex grind is it doesn't bite into the wood as hard as, say, my Scandinavian grinds. I have to be very careful about the angle I'm carving feathers with, because otherwise I'll just dig too deep. Versus I feel like this grind right here just really slides on the wood and produces these very, very fine feathers. So let me clean up my area here just real quick. Alright, back for more. So we've covered the blade. It's virtually indestructible. You can break it, obviously. You can break anything if you're really abusing it, but through normal use, and if you're not just hacking the ground or gravel, you're not going to chip out this edge if you're using it on wood. This knife will always win against wood, and unless there's rocks inside of it, or if you're digging a hole with your knife, which I don't know why you would do that unless you aren't experienced with sharp knives at all. This knife will perform for you. The handle is made out of something called Thermarun, and it's not quite as grippy as the rubber on this handle. I believe this is a Creighton rubber handle. The Thermarun is not as grippy. It's much, much firmer. It's a very, very firm. It does have a very subtle grippiness to it on its own, but it does feel much, much more firm. The best thing I can compare it to, something that's cheaper, that probably a lot of you have experienced, is the orange part on this handle on any of the Fiskars X series hatchets or axes or mauls. It feels very similar to this, But of course, this is very thin on here, but it does have this firmness, this kind of tactile rubberness to it, which is different from this plastic up here, if you've noticed on these axes. So it feels good. This nub right here, I've been thinking about cutting it off. I really don't like any kind of guards on my knives. I'm a guard-free guy. I've got enough grip strength to really hold on to this guy. I'm not really worried about it slipping out of my hand. And you can cut this off to mod it. This is just all thermo run right here, but it helps with the sheath. It retains the knife based on this guard right here. Balance of the blades right there at the guard, which is, I'll admit, it's a little unusual for this knife because most knives have the balance point back here, which is not the case. Handle has a slight swell to it, and it kind of gets narrow and then swells out back here. You know, it's probably not the most comfortable handle for hands of these size. I wear a large, extra large glove for comparison. A little squarish. The grip is grippy, which is nice. These are kind of like raised pyramids. Let's see if you can see that there. It's still a little dirty from a trip I just took where it was just pissing rain. But yeah, just little raised pyramids on there. They're grippy. They feel decent. You know, this handle isn't very conducive for chopping. Like, I really can't, I don't feel like I can get a really good hold of it. I feel like it'd be safer to have a lanyard attached to extend the grip on the lanyard itself so the knife just has something more to grip onto. I will give it to the charade knife that this curved portion back here really gives you a good grip for chopping. I know it's a knife and I got axes, but every once in a while I like to chop with my knives. This swell is decent right here. I feel like it really locks in. If I do chop without a lanyard, I use my ring finger back here and I wrap that around like so, and that gives me some decent chopping. And I do like the exposed tang back here. This is really helpful for actually just sometimes if you need to split a big piece of wood, you can carve about 3 wedges out of wood and use this guy right here and basically just hammer it into the log and then start using your wooden wedges to kind of walking wedges down the log to split the whole thing in half. And so for a survival situation, if you needed to get a big fire going and all you have is this knife, you could totally do that. Now let's move on to the ugly stepsister of the knife, the sheath. This sheath is, it's ugly as sin. I'll admit that. It's not as sexy. Just like this handle, actually. There's kind of a theme going with this knife where it's just a very simple, keep it simple, stupid setup. Everything on this knife is for function. It's not necessarily for looks. I feel like the blade is really good looking, but everything else on this knife, compared to other knives at the same price point, it's not a very attractive. And I feel like that's really what turns a lot of people away from this knife. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you're spending that kind of money, you're going for more than just function. You're going for aesthetics, micarta handles, which feel amazing, you know, kydex sheaths, which are just, you know, out of this world. I really like kydex. But, you know, there are some advantages. I guess Fallkniven used to make knife sheaths in kydex, but they discovered when people were actually using the knives up in the Swedish Laplands that what would happen a lot of time is because kydex is pressure fit, what would happen is if the blade was wet at all, and when the temperature dropped, the knife would freeze stuck in the kydex sheath. So you have these loose tolerances in this sheath, decent retention, but it won't freeze inside here, and it's also got some drainage inside. You can kind of see the twin holes right there for the drainage. So yeah, I mean, the sheath is practical, but it's not sexy at all. This is, I feel like this is somewhat unacceptable right here. Just how, I mean, it is cool how simple it is. The rivets and stuff are high quality. You can see the paint has worn off over a month of use on this, but it's really a high quality snap rivet. But if I'm gonna spend that kind of money, I would at least go an extra effort on this belt loop right here. I feel like this is definitely the weak point of this sheath. Yes, everything is high quality, but maybe give us some more options, such as, you know, I can Ranger band this stuff on here, like my ferrocerium rod, but maybe just put a ferro loop on there for me. Or maybe like the Cold Steel SRK, have the option of having this belt loop removable, you know, make it heavier duty like the Cold Steel SRK, as well as having the ability to be able to take this on and off your belt without having to take your belt off, which would be nice. And I feel like for as much money as you pay for this knife, you know, Fallkniven should be able to do that for you. But yeah, you know, the sheath will work. The sheath is a sheath. It's not going to cut through this sheath like it would a leather sheath. It's waterproof, which is one of the reasons I was looking for this knife for the environment I live in. So I just I'll deal with it. It's fine. And you know, I can lash it up. It's really lightweight. I'll give it that. You're not really lugging around anything heavy. And it really goes with the simplistic nature of pure function with the knife, the kind of theme the knife is going for. Let's see what else. The ferrocerium rod, you know, it will strike sparks with the rod. Over time, though, I think this, like we were talking about, this lamination. These corners are actually softer steel, so striking with the ferro rod, I'm not sure how long this this spine will stay sharp compared to just a knife that's fully tempered, which is a drawback that I'm fine with. And you can see that there's definitely been some wear from me using the ferrocerium rod, since the sides on this Fallkniven are softer than the cutting core. But one thing I've noticed, and a drawback of this knife I'll talk about in a later review, is that because the sides of this laminated steel are softer, with this knife I can't even really get any sparks. And I've hit this thing with a file, I've hit it with a Dremel, I've hit it with a carbide sharpener. I cannot get this spine sharp enough to get sparks very well. So luckily this Fallkniven is able to do that, but I think it will wear the spine much faster than a non-laminated knife, so there's just something to look into. Alright, so how do I integrate this knife into my carry system? Like I said, I usually carry a saw. Before I got this knife, I was carrying around a Mora, and then also the axe I showed you guys. Why do I need this knife? Why do I need to integrate my knife when I already have the knife, the saw, the axe? Well, let me tell you guys, I feel like I could completely bypass the Mora knife. I feel like a lot of people carry two blades. There are some people that are really into bushcraft and survival. They're kind of told by a lot of different schools of thought that you need a heavy-duty knife for survival, and then you also need a specialty knife, such as a Mora, to make up for the lack of cutting performance on your survival knife. But I feel like this knife right here completely bypasses the need for having a Mora knife or a small Scandinavian carving knife, because the edge performance is so well on this thing. This is basically two knives in one, I feel, since they could do those tasks I could show you. And as far as needing a smaller knife, you can really just choke up on the blade. I do that for drilling holes. If you're going to drill holes and things, you can really just choke up. and it does fine, you know, even just chamfering things like so. And if you really need to, what I do is, I'm a real VG10 fan. I carry this on me, just a Spyderco Delica VG10, and this is really my knife setup. I still carry my saw and my axe, but my knife setup is now just consists of these two blades right here. So, getting on with it, is this knife worth the cost? For me, I feel like it definitely is. But I would say yes. Yes, it is if. And when I say if, I mean if you're a blade head like me. And what I mean by blade head is, can you sharpen your own knives? Do you understand and appreciate quality steel? And are you looking for the most indestructible production stainless steel survival knife in the world? Then I would say yes. For $200, you're getting exactly what you're looking for. If you're really just getting into some stuff, such as just going out camping maybe 3 times a year, or if you're just interested in knives but just a passing interest, I would say no, absolutely not. $200 is way too much money, and you should look somewhere else for a knife such as this Charade will do fine. For a lot of people, this thing will do fine in a survival situation. But if you have a finer taste in blades and knives in general, you can sharpen them so you can truly appreciate and understand them, as well as the construction and quality, fit and finish of this knife, then you are getting your money's worth from this Fallkniven A1. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll try to get more knife reviews for you. Like I said, I've got a few more knives in my collection I'd like to cover for you guys. And make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks, guys. Take care.